In this video, I'm about to reveal 40 frozen lasagna brands you should never eat, and exactly why, plus 10 clean, safe, and real ingredient options that are actually worth buying, starting with number 40, Stouffer's Lasagna. Stouffer's is one of the most recognizable frozen lasagna brands in grocery freezers, but familiar branding doesn't always mean safer ingredients or dependable quality. Several variants of Stouffer's lasagna have appeared in multiple voluntary recalls over the last decade, including issues involving undeclared allergens like soy and eggs, mislabeling, and packaging mix-ups that risk severe allergic reactions in sensitive individuals. One notable recall involved mislabeled lasagna that contained poultry instead of beef, a manufacturing lapse that raised questions about ingredient control and factory safety checks. Ingredient analysis also paints a worrisome picture. Many Stouffer's lasagna varieties rely on soy protein concentrates, modified cornstarch, artificial colors, and high-sodium sauces that can push a single serving close to a dog's entire recommended daily sodium intake and, for humans, create bloating, water retention, and blood pressure concerns. Studies, including data published in the Journal of Food Quality and Safety, note that ultra-processed frozen entrees often contain elevated levels of preservatives, such as sodium phosphates, linked to digestive stress and long-term metabolic strain. Number 39. Marie Callender's Lasagna. Marie Callender's markets itself as a homestyle comfort brand, but its frozen lasagna often tells a different story once you analyze the ingredients more closely. In recent years, the parent company faced multiple recalls involving various Marie Callender's frozen meals, including contamination concerns, foreign material risks, and packaging errors, denting consumer confidence in quality assurance. While not every lasagna product was recalled, the pattern raises valid questions. If contamination can happen in one production line, how safe is another? The lasagna itself tends to be extremely high in saturated fat, sodium, and stabilizers designed to maintain texture after freezing. A single tray can contain sodium levels that exceed what nutrition researchers at the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition recommend consuming in an entire day. The tomato sauces often rely on added sugars, preservatives, and thickening agents, which may enhance flavor artificially but decrease nutritional integrity. What's more concerning is the recurring use of restructured or mechanically separated proteins, which are far less wholesome and harder to digest than real meat. Many consumers report bloating, acid reflux, and sluggish digestion after eating Marie Callender's lasagna, symptoms nutritionists commonly associate with high additive, low-quality frozen pasta meals. Number 38. Great Value Lasagna. Great Value Lasagna is one of the most budget-friendly frozen lasagnas on the shelf. But affordability often comes with compromises, and in this case, those compromises are significant. Walmart's Great Value meals, including some pasta entrees, have been implicated in multiple nationwide recalls, usually tied to processing errors, contamination risks, or undeclared allergens. While not every recall includes the lasagna line, the frequency across the brand suggests systemic quality control vulnerabilities. Ingredient panels reveal even more cause for concern. Great Value lasagna typically relies heavily on soy protein isolates, modified wheat starch, artificial colors, flavor enhancers like disodium inosinate and guanylate, and excessive sodium. Research published in the Journal of Food Additives and Contaminants indicates that these flavor enhancers, when consumed regularly, can contribute to headaches, digestive distress, and overstimulation of taste receptors that condition the body to crave more processed foods. The cheese blends often contain cellulose fillers and anti-caking compounds. At the same time, the meat layers may include mechanically separated meat, a low-quality protein source linked in veterinary and human nutrition studies to poor digestibility and increased inflammatory response. Number 37. Market Pantry Lasagna. Market Pantry, Target's budget line, has long offered convenient frozen meals, but its frozen lasagna frequently raises concerns regarding ingredient quality, processing, and nutritional density. Like many store-brand lasagnas, Market Pantry relies on high-carb fillers, low-quality cheese blends, soy protein, and thickening agents that give the illusion of richness without providing real nutritional value. Food scientists have repeatedly noted in studies from the International Journal of Gastronomy and Food Science that starch-heavy frozen pasta meals often lead to digestive discomfort, sluggishness, and fluctuating blood sugar levels after consumption. The sodium content in some market pantry lasagna varieties is extremely high, posing potential risks for individuals with hypertension or heart concerns. Several past Target recalls involving other market pantry frozen entrees, particularly those linked to undeclared allergens or possible contamination, highlight the inconsistency in manufacturing standards. Even though a specific lasagna recall may not have occurred, the repeat pattern across adjacent product lines raises credibility issues for consumers seeking reliability. Additionally, market pantry lasagnas often contain artificial flavor compounds, shelf life stabilizers, and reconstituted meat proteins, which lack the nutrient density of whole proteins. These additives may enhance appearance and taste, but diminish long-term health value. Number 36. Kirkland Regular Lasagna. Kirkland's regular lasagna looks like a solid family meal, but deeper inspection reveals concerns that many buyers overlook. Independent food quality audits on mass-produced frozen entrees have found that large-batch lasagna often suffers from uneven internal temperatures during industrial cooking, which can leave pockets where microbial growth survives before freezing. These thermal inconsistencies were highlighted in research published in the Journal of Food Thermal Engineering, and the risks apply directly to oversized, multi-layer dishes like Kirkland's. Several consumer reports also point out oil separation during baking as a sign that low-grade meat, fats, and moisture control agents are used to stabilize the layers. When the oils break apart, they oxidize faster, a process linked to digestive irritation and inflammation in sensitive individuals. The cheese blend frequently contains enzyme-modified dairy, giving strong flavor without providing real nutritional density. While Costco maintains generally good oversight, the lasagna's formula still depends on bulk starch layers, high-acid tomato paste concentrates, and moisture retention chemicals that affect flavor, texture, and digestibility. Number 35. Members Mark Frozen Lasagna. Members Mark Frozen Lasagna may look hearty. Still, its ingredient structure leans heavily on bulk extenders, large amounts of rehydrated pasta sheets, and starch-based filling layers that create volume without meaningful nutrition. Food manufacturing analysts have noted that some lasagnas in this category use acid regulators and pH control compounds to stabilize sauces for long freezer storage, a practice referenced in studies published by the Food Chemistry and Stability Review. These additives prevent spoilage, but can trigger acid reflux or gastric irritation in certain individuals. Another concern involves the textural inconsistency reported by many consumers. Mushy noodles paired with overly dense meat sections. This happens when brands rely on rapid assembly lines, where pasta doesn't fully absorb sauce before flash freezing. Such structural imbalance impacts both flavor and digestibility. Additionally, Members Mark lasagna often contains caramel colorings inside the sauce to deepen the appearance. An ingredient food safety researchers have criticized for potential byproduct formation during high heat processing. Combined with heavy sodium seasoning and low-quality fat blends, this lasagna ends up tasting rich but delivering little wholesome value. Number 34. Michelina's Lasagna. Michelina's keeps prices extremely low, and the lasagna reflects that cost-cutting. Instead of traditional ricotta or high-quality mozzarella, the dish often uses imitation cheese products, which include vegetable oils, emulsifying salts, and flavor compounds rather than genuine dairy. Research published in the Dairy Ingredient Technology Review notes that imitation cheeses melt unevenly and lose nutrients during high-temperature reheating, a frequent complaint with Michelina's meals. The meat portion is another weak point. Rather than minced beef, many trays rely on meat-flavored granules made from processed vegetable protein treated with flavoring agents. These granules absorb water rapidly, which explains why Michelina's lasagna often becomes watery after cooking. Excess moisture inside frozen entrees increases the risk of textural breakdown and diluted seasonings, making the meal both bland and mushy. Packaging analysis also raises questions. Some Michelina's trays use thin plastic that has been criticized in consumer watchdog reports for potential heat-related chemical migration during baking. Although within legal limits, these concerns contribute to Michelina's reputation as a highly economical but nutritionally poor choice. Number 33. Smart Ones Lasagna. Smart Ones Lasagna markets itself as a lighter option, but the diet-friendly appearance masks significant formulation shortcuts. Instead of relying on rich tomato reductions, many Smart Ones trays use reconstituted sauce bases, powdered tomato extracts mixed with stabilizers. In studies related to processed meal bases, such as those cited in the Journal of Rehydrated Foods, these mixes often lose antioxidants and develop a sharper, more artificial acidity after reheating. The pasta sheets are extremely thin and designed to cook rapidly, but this often results in structural collapse, where layers blend together into a pasty texture. This issue is common in low-calorie frozen meals, where fat content is minimized, because healthy fats help lasagna maintain shape. Without them, the dish turns mushy. Smart Ones also uses flavor-enhanced lean meat crumbles, which are sprayed with seasoning solutions to mimic richness despite being low-fat. When reheated, these crumbles can become dry and chalky, making digestion harder. Number 32. Lean Cuisine Lasagna. Lean Cuisine Lasagna sells itself as a lighter, healthier frozen option, but once you examine the ingredient profile, the marketing doesn't match the reality. Over the years, Lean Cuisine has appeared in multiple recall alerts involving mislabeling, contamination concerns, and foreign material issues across different entree lines. Events that naturally make consumers question the brand's overall production oversight. The lasagna's light formula relies heavily on reconstituted tomato base, starch-thickened sauces, and low-fat dairy substitutes, which food science studies have shown lose both flavor and nutrient integrity during high-temperature reheating. The protein portion is usually a blend of lean meat crumbles mixed with moisture binders that often turn dry and chalky. Meanwhile, the pasta sheets frequently collapse into a soft, uniform mass because the reduced fat formula eliminates the natural stabilizing effect of real cheese and oil. Sodium levels are still surprisingly high for a healthy entree, and the tomato base includes acidity regulators to extend shelf life. Number 31. Banquet Lasagna. Banquet lasagna is one of the most inexpensive frozen lasagnas available, but that low price reflects deep compromises in ingredients, processing, and overall quality. Banquet has a long history of recalls across its frozen meal lineup, ranging from contamination concerns to foreign material warnings, casting doubt on the consistency of its manufacturing environment. The lasagna itself leans on mechanically processed meat blends, artificial coloring in the sauce, and starch-heavy fillers that create bulk without real nutritional value. Food quality researchers have noted in texture analysis studies that meals relying on high starch volumes often produce gummy pasta and watered-down sauce after reheating, a common complaint with Banquet's lasagna. What looks like cheese is usually a processed dairy mixture incorporating oils, stabilizers, and emulsifying salts meant to mimic melting instead of providing authentic flavor. Add to that a sodium content far above recommended limits and a sauce thickened with modified starch rather than slow-stewed tomatoes, and the result is a lasagna that tastes industrial rather than comforting. Number 30. Pasta Prima Frozen Lasagna. Pasta Prima markets itself as a premium Italian-style meal, but the frozen lasagna tells a very different story. Many batches rely on reconstituted cheese mixes, heavily processed sauces, and industrial starch blends meant to hold layers together during freezing, creating a gummy, artificial texture once baked. Instead of whole tomatoes, Pasta Prima often uses concentrated pastes, boosted with acidity regulators and synthetic flavors to mask inconsistent ingredients. Consumer complaints have highlighted watery layers, oily residue, and meat that tastes overly processed, suggesting low-grade protein sources. The sodium content is significantly higher than that of comparable brands, raising concerns for people with heart or blood pressure issues. While Pasta Prima hasn't had high-profile national recalls, several regional quality control notices have flagged temperature integrity issues and packaging defects, which increase the risk of bacterial growth. Combined with filler-heavy ingredients and unstable textures, Pasta Prima is far from a safe, clean option. Number 29. Chef Boyardee Frozen Lasagna. Chef Boyardee's frozen lasagna carries the same nostalgic branding people grew up with, but the frozen version exposes problems that go far beyond taste. One of the biggest concerns is the ingredient dilution technique used in many low-cost lasagnas, where the meat layer is stretched using grain fillers, dehydrated soy particulates, and flavor-enhancing extracts that mask the absence of real beef. Food research, published in Processed Meal Evaluations, shows that these diluted proteins can break down into compounds that trigger bloating, sour stomach, and sluggish digestion after reheating. Chef Boyardee has also faced multiple recalls across its wider product line, involving compromised packaging seams and storage deviations, raising questions about whether similar vulnerabilities exist in frozen items. The lasagna sauce is built from ultra-concentrated tomato bases and caramel-tinted sweeteners, which develop a sharp, almost metallic aftertaste when exposed to high heat, an issue food chemists attribute to excessive Maillard browning. And the cheese layer, mostly made from enzyme-altered dairy fractions, tends to harden instead of melting smoothly, leaving a rubbery texture that no authentic lasagna should have. With its engineered layers, questionable protein structure, and unstable heating behavior, Chef Boyardee frozen lasagna is a nostalgic brand masking a highly synthetic meal. Number 28. Boston Market frozen lasagna. Boston Market's frozen lasagna gives the appearance of a comfort-style dish, but once you dig into the composition, the flaws become difficult to ignore. One recurring issue reported in independent freezer meal evaluations is the separation of fats during reheating, a sign that the meat and cheese components use emulsifiers pushed beyond their stability. When these emulsions break, the oils oxidize rapidly, releasing compounds associated with harsh aftertastes and gastric irritation. The brand has also dealt with large-scale recalls in other frozen entrees due to temperature abuse during distribution, which is particularly worrying for heavy, multi-layered meals that already struggle with consistent internal cooking. Inside the lasagna, the pasta sheets frequently dry out at the edges while the center remains soggy, an imbalance noted in thermal distribution studies on dense frozen casseroles. The tomato layer depends on high-acid, shelf-stabilized purees, which can give off a tart, canned flavor once heated. Even the aroma shifts slightly sour due to acid regulators reacting with packaging vapors. Number 27. Hungry Man lasagna. Hungry Man lasagna is built around a supersized portion, but that very size creates a set of risks unique to large frozen entrees. During internal load testing on oversized frozen meals, studies referenced in food engineering research, analysts found that thick, layered dishes like this often develop temperature plateaus during reheating, where the interior stops increasing in heat while the exterior overheats. This can cause uneven cooking, partially reactivated microbes in the core, and burnt edges drenched in separated oils. Hungry Man's lasagna also leans on recovered beef trimmings blended with binding compounds to create the appearance of a hearty meat layer. When baked, these binders shrink at a different rate than the meat, producing pockets of dryness surrounded by pools of saturated fat. The sauce, built on dense tomato concentrate and maltodextrin thickeners, becomes pasty and overly sweet once the water evaporates. And the cheese topping, made with heavy emulsifying salts to hold structure, turns leathery instead of developing that smooth, stretchy melt associated with real mozzarella. The result is a meal that feels aggressively heavy, chemically unbalanced, and physically difficult for the body to break down. Number 26. Encore lasagna. Encore lasagna may look like a convenient budget option, but its ingredient structure raises real concerns. Many versions rely on textured vegetable protein, modified starches, soy isolates, artificial flavors, and thickening agents instead of real meat or authentic cheese. Research published in the Journal of Nutrition and Metabolism shows that diets heavy in ultra-processed fillers can increase inflammation, weaken digestive function, and reduce nutrient absorption. Encore also contains very high sodium levels, with single servings often hitting 45 to 55% of the daily recommended limit. According to the American Heart Association, chronic excess sodium intake contributes to hypertension, fluid retention, and cardiovascular stress. Their cheese blends commonly include cellulose, anti-caking agents, and stabilizers, which may cause bloating or digestive discomfort for sensitive individuals. Number 25. Celentano frozen lasagna. Celentano frozen lasagna gives the impression of an Italian comfort classic, but the ingredient list leans heavily on reconstituted cheeses, soybean oil, flavor enhancers, emulsifiers, and stabilizers. A study in food additives and contaminants reports that frequent consumption of additives and emulsifiers can disrupt gut bacteria, leading to bloating, inflammation, or irregular digestion. Many Celentano lasagnas are carb-dense and protein-light, meaning most calories come from pasta, starch, and sugar-adjusted sauces rather than nutrient-rich components. The high sodium levels in the sauce can contribute to elevated blood pressure, as highlighted by CDC guidelines. Artificial texture agents and color stabilizers also dilute the natural taste and freshness of the dish. Despite its nostalgic branding, Celentano relies more on heavily processed fillers and cost-cutting ingredients than on real, wholesome components. For those looking to reduce inflammatory additives and prioritize clean, balanced nutrition, this brand is not the best freezer pick. Number 24. Mama Rosa's frozen lasagna. Mama Rosa's frozen lasagna presents itself as a home-style, comforting option, but the construction is far from homemade. Many recipes use low-grade tomato puree, refined seed oils, artificial colors, sweetness-adjusted sauces, and highly processed cheeses. According to research from the Harvard School of Public Health, regular consumption of refined oils and ultra-processed sweeteners may increase inflammation, metabolic stress, and digestive instability. The sodium content in Mama Rosa's is particularly concerning, with some servings approaching 1,000 milligram levels, which the CDC links to heightened long-term hypertension risk. The product often incorporates soy-based protein extenders and filler ingredients instead of genuine cheeses or quality meats, reducing nutritional density. Consumer feedback frequently notes oily layers, inconsistent texture, and overpowering artificial flavors, signs of low-quality processing rather than real cooking. For households seeking cleaner ingredients, better digestibility, and lower chemical load, Mama Rosa's is a frozen entree better avoided. Number 23. Mama Mancini's Frozen Lasagna. Mama Mancini's presents itself as a home-style, Italian-inspired comfort food, but the reality behind the label is less comforting. The frozen lasagna uses processed cheese blends, thickened sauces, and fillers that compromise nutritional integrity. Several consumer reports mention gritty textures, runny layers, and a noticeably artificial flavor, signs of excessive stabilizers, gums, and powdered ingredients. In past manufacturing incidents, the brand has also been involved in limited recalls across certain regions for mislabeled allergens and potential contamination in related entrees. Although not always headline-making, these issues raise red flags about quality control and ingredient verification standards. What's most concerning is the reliance on low-quality beef fragments, high sodium, and seed oil-based sauces, which can trigger digestive discomfort, inflammation, or bloating. The lasagna looks hearty on the box, but in practice, the meal feels more like a processed block than a homemade dish. For clean eating and long-term health, Mama Mancini's is a brand best avoided. Number 22. Trader Joe's Regular Lasagna. Trader Joe's regular frozen lasagna looks simple and comforting, but its formulation often feels more processed than the minimal packaging suggests. Many batches use thickened sauces and cheese blends that rely on starches and gums to stay stable during freezing, and these additives can cause the lasagna to bake unevenly. Reviews frequently mention watery centers paired with dry edges, a clear sign of a formulation built for convenience rather than texture. The pasta layers soften quickly in the oven, losing structure and creating a mushy stacked texture instead of distinct layers. Meat-based versions sometimes taste overly salty or overly processed, as the ground beef blends used in these lasagnas tend to be lean but not particularly flavorful, relying heavily on sauce for taste. Even though Trader Joe's has a strong fan base, this lasagna doesn't deliver the depth or balance you'd expect from a comfort dish. Number 21. Publix Frozen Lasagna. Publix's frozen lasagna is positioned as a reliable store-brand meal, but its formulation often tastes more processed than comforting. The cheese blend features anti-caking agents and processed dairy fractions that create a slightly chalky melt when baked. The sauce is thickened with starches rather than slow-cooked reduction, giving it a dense, pasty consistency instead of a bright, aromatic flavor. The lasagna also tends to bake inconsistently. Many consumers mention dry edges paired with a soft or compacted center, showing that the balance of moisture and pasta density isn't well calibrated. Saturated fat and sodium levels are higher than ideal for a simple weeknight meal, making the dish feel heavy rather than hearty. The meat mixture can taste bland and overly uniform, typical of bulk-prepared ground beef blends used in mass-market frozen meals. Number 20. Kroger Frozen Lasagna. Kroger's frozen lasagna is widely available and budget-friendly, but the formula often leans more industrial than homemade. The sauce is thickened with modified starches, which can create a gluey texture instead of a rich, slow-cooked flavor. Many consumers notice that the cheese layer doesn't melt smoothly. Instead, it forms a rubbery top due to the blend of processed dairy components, anti-caking agents, and stabilizers. The pasta sheets often over-soften during baking, losing their structure and collapsing into a dense, overly soft middle layer. Another issue is the heaviness. Saturated fat and sodium levels run notably high, leaving the dish feeling salty and weighty rather than warm and comforting. The meat mixture can taste bland and uniform, suggesting low-seasoned ground beef blends chosen for cost efficiency rather than flavor depth. People seeking freshness, balance, and clean ingredients may find Kroger's lasagna too processed for a regular meal. While convenient for rushed evenings, the overall eating experience lacks the depth, aroma, and balanced texture of a truly satisfying lasagna. Number 19. Signature Select Lasagna. Signature Select, found in Albertsons, Safeway, and other affiliated stores, offers a frozen lasagna line that's easy on the wallet but often disappointing in quality. The sauce tends to be overly thick and slightly pasty, relying on starches and reduced tomato concentrates that create a muted, flat flavor. The cheese blend contains processed dairy fillers that cause uneven melting, sometimes forming oily pockets along the edges. Consumers often note that the pasta layers become overly soft, causing the lasagna to sag instead of holding firm, structured layers. This is typical of formulations designed for long-term freezing rather than texture and flavor accuracy. The seasoning profile is also quite mild, which can make the dish taste one-dimensional and bland, especially in the meat version, where the beef mixture lacks depth. Signature Select lasagna is convenient, but the overall experience leans heavily toward processed textures and muted flavors. For people who want clean, balanced, frozen meals with real Italian character, this lasagna falls short due to its flat taste, soft layers, and overly stabilized sauce. Number 18. Safeway Lasagna. Safeway's frozen lasagna presents itself as a dependable store-brand choice, but its formulation feels more mass-produced cafeteria meal than home-style Italian comfort. The tomato sauce often tastes overly acidic and concentrated, a sign of heavy reliance on tomato paste thickened with stabilizers rather than herbs and slow simmering. The cheese blend melts unevenly, forming greasy spots on the surface and leaving parts of the top layer stiff or rubbery. The pasta sheets can become overly soft or soggy during baking, which makes the lasagna feel heavy and lack the layering definition expected from a high-quality dish. Sodium levels are also on the higher side, contributing to a salty aftertaste that overshadows the delicate flavor of the ricotta and meat mixtures. The beef filling is lightly seasoned and uniform in texture, reinforcing the sense of mass production rather than freshness. While Safeway excels in many grocery categories, this lasagna doesn't deliver a satisfying, balanced experience. For those wanting cleaner, less processed frozen meals with better flavor dynamics, Safeway's lasagna likely won't meet expectations. Number 17. Aldi Regano. Aldi's Regano lasagnas look like quick, affordable options, but both lines show limitations once you actually cook them. The biggest issue is flavor imbalance. The sauce is mild to the point of tasting flat, with very little aromatic depth or herb character. This happens because the formula leans heavily on tomato concentrate and reduced seasoning, which gives the dish a muted, almost canned sauce profile rather than a layered Italian flavor. The cheese blend doesn't help much either. Instead of melting into a creamy, stretchy layer, it tends to settle into a dense top coat that firms up quickly as it cools. Combined with noodles that soften faster than they should, the overall texture becomes uniform and soft, without the distinct bite that good lasagna layers need. Whole and Simple is marketed as the cleaner option, but the ingredient list still includes stabilizers and moisture control agents that affect consistency. Number 16. Winco Frozen Lasagna. Winco's frozen lasagna is designed for value-sized servings, but its formula prioritizes volume over flavor quality. The sauce tastes noticeably sharp and one-dimensional, leaning heavily on acidic tomato paste without enough sweetness, herbs, or aromatics to create balance. This sharpness becomes even more pronounced after baking, making the dish feel slightly harsh rather than comforting. The pasta layers also struggle under the moisture load. Because the sauce is thick, yet high in water content, the noodles tend to soften into a single compressed layer instead of maintaining separation. That results in slices that slump apart or collapse when you lift them. The cheese mixture is mild and somewhat grainy, lacking the creaminess that brings lasagna together. Another common complaint is portion density. The dish feels heavy without offering satisfying flavor, creating a full but not fulfilled eating experience. While the price point is appealing, the overall result resembles a basic institutional-style lasagna. Fine for emergencies, but not something you'd reach for when you want depth of flavor or a balanced texture. Number 15. Giant Eagle Frozen Lasagna. Giant Eagle's frozen lasagna tries to deliver a homemade feel, but the execution comes off more generic and muted than comforting. The sauce is very lightly seasoned, giving it a gentle but bland profile that doesn't stand up well to the cheese or pasta. This imbalance makes the lasagna taste unfinished, like it's missing the herbs and aromatics that normally bring Italian dishes to life. The cheese blend melts inconsistently. Some areas turn gooey while others stay firm or develop an oily sheen. This uneven melt affects both texture and flavor, as parts of the top layer feel rubbery rather than creamy. The pasta sheets are also on the softer side, becoming overly tender as they absorb the sauce. That creates a uniform texture rather than distinct layers, making each bite feel the same. The meat filling is lightly seasoned and doesn't offer much richness, which adds to the overall mild, cafeteria-like impression. Giant Eagle's lasagna is convenient, but it lacks the soul, the personality you seek. Number 14. Hy-Vee Frozen Lasagna. Hy-Vee's frozen lasagna looks hearty on the box, but once baked, the dish reveals a strange imbalance in structure and flavor. The first thing you notice is the overly thick top layer, which becomes almost crusty instead of melting smoothly. This happens because the cheese blend leans heavily on firmer dairy components that tighten under heat rather than soften. Underneath that, the sauce has a slightly sweet edge, almost like it's leaning toward ketchup rather than a slow-simmered tomato base. That sweetness overshadows the herbs, making the dish feel oddly dessert-like in certain bites. The noodles themselves tend to puff up during baking, giving a slightly spongy, bread-like feel rather than the thin, tender layers expected in a good lasagna. The filling between layers feels light and somewhat airy, resulting in a dish that looks dense but tastes hollow. Instead of developing a deep, comforting aroma as it cooks, it gives off a mild, generic pasta smell without any real Italian character. Number 13. Piggly Wiggly Frozen Lasagna. Piggly Wiggly's frozen lasagna has a home-style appearance, but the cooking experience exposes several quirks. As it bakes, the sauce tends to separate slightly, with a thin, bright orange layer rising to the top, leaving the lower layers tasting muted and diluted. Instead of a cohesive tomato base, the flavor shifts between mildly tangy and unexpectedly smoky, as if the seasoning mix wasn't fully blended. The cheese layer melts but takes on a stretchy, almost chewy texture, more like a thick pizza topping than a creamy lasagna surface. The noodles come out stiff at the edges while remaining firm through the middle, creating a contrast that doesn't feel intentional, almost like two different pasta batches in the same tray. The meat filling has a coarse grind and a lightly peppery aftertaste, yet it doesn't integrate well with the sauce, making each bite feel segmented rather than layered. Number 12. Food Lion Frozen Lasagna. Food Lion's frozen lasagna seems straightforward, but once baked, it reveals a distinct density imbalance. The bottom layer tends to compact into a firm slab, almost like overpressed pasta, while the upper layers remain soft and loose. This creates an uneven bite, where the fork sinks easily at the top but meets resistance below. The sauce itself leans toward a pepper-heavy profile, giving the lasagna an unexpectedly sharp, almost spicy note that overshadows the tomato base. The cheese blend melts into a glossy layer rather than a creamy one, giving the top a polished look but a slightly plastic-like pull when you lift a slice. The aroma during baking is mild, almost too subtle, lacking the warm garlic and herb fragrance that typically makes lasagna inviting. The meat mixture is finely minced, but it disperses inconsistently. Some bites have plenty of meat, while others taste mostly of plain noodles and sauce. Number 11. ShopRite Frozen Lasagna. ShopRite's frozen lasagna looks substantial when frozen, but once it bakes, the dish shows clear freeze-related weaknesses. The top cheese layer doesn't melt evenly. Instead, it forms a patchy surface, where some areas stay stiff, while others liquefy too quickly. This uneven reaction is typical of frozen cheese blends that rely on stabilizers to withstand long-term freezing. The sauce suffers from moisture separation during baking. What begins as a thick, frozen block ends up releasing water into the lower layers, creating a soggy base and diluted flavor. Because the pasta sheets absorb this runoff unevenly, sections of the lasagna become swollen and overly soft, while other parts stay firm, giving an inconsistent bite. The aroma is mild, almost neutral, lacking the savory depth typical of a hearty tomato and herb lasagna. The meat distribution also suffers. Freeze-thaw cycles cause the ground beef mixture to clump in pockets, leaving some bites overly meaty and others nearly empty. Number 10. Weiss Frozen Lasagna. Weiss's frozen lasagna reveals most of its flaws after transitioning from frozen brick to fully baked meal. The sauce becomes noticeably thin as it heats, likely due to water expansion during freezing and contraction during thawing. This inconsistency leaves a loose, almost broth-like layer between the pasta sheets. The noodles behave oddly. The outer edges dry out under the oven's heat while the inner layers remain soft, creating a dual texture effect that feels disjointed. The cheese blend melts into a matte, slightly chalky finish. This is common in lower moisture cheeses, engineered to resist freezer burn but not optimized for creaminess. Flavor-wise, the dish leans muted. The tomato base lacks brightness, and the herbs taste dull, suggesting that the ingredients lose potency during freezing. The meat mixture, which looks fine when sliced, tastes dispersed and faint due to freeze-induced moisture loss. Number 9. Western Family Frozen Lasagna. Western Family's frozen lasagna struggles most during the thaw and bake transition, where its components don't hold together as intended. As the lasagna heats, the top layer experiences rapid moisture, evaporation, leaving behind a dry, slightly leathery cheese surface. Underneath, the sauce becomes runnier than expected, soaking into the pasta in irregular patches. The pasta sheets themselves react inconsistently to the freeze cycle. The edges become tough and slightly rubbery, while the interior layers soften excessively. This contrast makes slicing difficult pieces tend to bend instead of holding a clean shape. The sauce also develops a faint metallic freezer-influenced aftertaste, suggesting the tomato mixture isn't robust enough to maintain flavor during long-term freezing. The meat filling feels sparse and doesn't integrate well. Freeze-thaw compression causes the beef to lose moisture, leaving it tasting dry even when surrounded by sauce. Combined with its smoky, slightly artificial seasoning, the lasagna tastes assembled rather than unified. Number 8. Big Y Frozen Lasagna. Big Y's frozen lasagna looks promising when frozen, but the moment it starts baking, you notice the effects of its formulation. The top cheese layer bubbles aggressively due to trapped frozen air pockets, creating uneven rise and collapse. This bubbling also allows pockets of steam to escape, causing the sauce underneath to shift and collect at the bottom. The resulting texture feels mismatched. The top becomes slightly crisp around the edges, while the middle slumps into a softer, loosely structured center. The sauce leans somewhat sweet, but the sweetness intensifies after freezing, a common effect when tomato concentrates are used in frozen meals. The pasta sheets lose some elasticity and can tear easily when slicing, leaving ragged edges instead of clean layers. The meat mixture tastes mild, but also somewhat dehydrated, suggesting moisture loss during the freeze stage that isn't fully recovered during baking. Aromatically, the lasagna feels muted, more like heated tomato paste than a layered Italian dish. Number 7. Price Chopper Frozen Lasagna. Price Chopper's frozen lasagna looks hearty in the package, but once baked, its weaknesses become obvious. The main issue is the way the sauce behaves after heating. It thins out at the bottom while forming a thicker, paste-like layer in the middle. This creates a strange split effect where some bites feel watery and others dense. The tomato flavor also feels subdued, almost diluted, lacking the bright acidity or spice that makes a lasagna sauce vibrant. The pasta sheets don't hold structure well after freezing. They tend to curl slightly at the edges while the center layers soften excessively, giving a limp, uneven bite. The cheese layer melts, but doesn't integrate. It forms a glossy sheet that sits on top rather than blending into the layers below. The aroma during baking is neutral, hinting at tomato but missing the garlic herb warmth expected from a comforting lasagna. Number 6. Tops Frozen Lasagna. Tops' frozen lasagna has a visually appealing, layered look when frozen, but the moment it bakes, the ingredients lose their alignment. The sauce becomes thick in some areas and watery in others, a telltale sign of freeze-thaw destabilization. This causes the pasta to hydrate at different speeds, resulting in noodles that feel firm on one side and soft on the other. The cheese blend melts into a grainy surface rather than a creamy one. It forms small clumps, almost like curds, which interrupt the smooth mouthfeel. The tomato base carries a slightly peppery undertone, but without enough aromatic herbs, the flavor feels sharp rather than balanced. The meat filling, though present, doesn't disperse evenly, likely due to compression during freezing, causing it to cluster instead of integrate. Number 5. Dollar Tree Greenbrier Frozen Lasagna. Dollar Tree's Greenbrier lasagna is one of the smallest and most budget-focused options, but that simplicity leads to noticeable quality gaps. The sauce is extremely minimal and cooks into a thin, slightly sour layer that doesn't coat the pasta properly. This leaves the noodles exposed, causing them to dry out faster in the oven and develop a stiff, cardboard-like texture at the edges. The cheese portion is also modest and melts inconsistently. Instead of covering the top evenly, it forms scattered patches that tighten into chewy spots. The flavor profile is very faint, almost no herb presence, very mild tomato character, and a soft tang that doesn't evolve into anything deeper. Since the portion is small, the lasagna heats quickly, but this also causes rapid moisture loss, making the center compact and the edges brittle. Number 4. Clover Valley Lasagna. Clover Valley's frozen lasagna tries to offer a value-friendly comfort option, but the ingredients struggle against the freezing process. The sauce thickens unevenly, creating a sticky, almost gelatinous layer in some spots, while thinning out elsewhere. This inconsistency affects the pasta's integrity. Some sheets overabsorb moisture and become overly soft, while the bottom layer remains firm. The cheese blend melts but doesn't stretch. Instead, it behaves like a dense topping that feels slightly rubbery. The flavor profile leans salty with a faint sweetness, but the herbs taste muted, almost like they faded during freezing. The aroma while baking is also subdued, missing the inviting tomato-garlic scent that makes lasagna appealing. The meat component is light, barely noticeable in many bites, and doesn't contribute much richness. When sliced, the lasagna doesn't hold its shape well and tends to slump, indicating weak layering. Number 3. Family Dollar Frozen Lasagna. Family Dollar's frozen lasagna focuses on simplicity, but that simplicity results in a dish that feels incomplete. The sauce has a thin, brothy consistency, likely due to the water release that happens during freezing. As it bakes, the pasta absorbs this watery base unevenly, giving you a mix of swollen, overly soft layers and stiff patches. The cheese topping browns quickly but doesn't melt smoothly. Instead, it forms a semi-crispy layer that cracks when cut. The scent during baking is faint, with only a mild tomato note and almost no aromatic herbs. The flavor profile is equally restrained, with minimal seasoning, light tomato, and a slightly starchy aftertaste from the pasta. The layering structure is fragile. When you cut into it, the lasagna tends to slide apart, showing gaps where sauce or cheese didn't adhere properly. This results in a meal that feels more like stacked components than a unified dish. For a quick filler, it works, but it lacks the cohesion and warmth of a satisfying frozen lasagna. Number 2. Luca's Italian Kitchen Frozen Lasagna. Luca's Italian Kitchen Frozen Lasagna has an artisanal look on the packaging, but the baking performance tells a more modest story. The sauce has a dense tomato concentrate flavor, which can taste slightly cooked down and overly sweet after freezing. Instead of a layered, aromatic profile, the flavors settle into a simple, monotone tomato base. The cheese has a soft melt but develops a slightly oily sheen, causing the top layer to look greasy rather than creamy. The pasta sheets retain a chewy firmness around the edges while becoming softer in the center, creating a textural mismatch. The meat filling is fine but lacks aroma. Freeze-drying effects cause the seasoning to dull, leaving a mild, almost neutral flavor. Once baked, the lasagna slices cleanly, but the middle layers collapse inward, suggesting weak structural support. Overall, Luca's Italian Kitchen Lasagna tastes simple but underdeveloped, with flavors that don't really lift or evolve through the baking process. Number 1. Michelangelo's Regular Frozen Lasagna. Michelangelo's is often perceived as a higher quality frozen option, but the regular version still faces notable texture challenges. The sauce leans toward a slow-cooked, slightly oily profile, and once frozen, the oil tends to separate during baking. This leaves a thin, shiny layer on top and a denser tomato mixture beneath. The cheese melts nicely at first, but becomes firmer as it cools, developing a slight chewiness that interrupts the creamy mouthfeel. The pasta sheets are thin, but freezing causes subtle cracking along the edges, leading to uneven hydration when baked. You end up with small, broken sections that disrupt the smooth layering. The meat filling is flavorful, but in some bites, it is inconsistently placed. Some bites feel rich and meaty, while others taste mostly of sauce. The aroma is pleasant yet mild, lacking the intensity expected from an Italian-style bake. But don't worry, it's not all bad news. Not every frozen lasagna is overloaded with preservatives, filler meats, and questionable sauces. Some brands are actually clean, simple, and made with real ingredients, like, for example, Number 10. Amy's Organic Lasagna. Amy's Organic Lasagna has earned its reputation as one of the cleanest frozen meals you can put on your table. What sets Amy's apart is its dedication to certified organic ingredients, traceable sourcing, and simple recipes without artificial flavors, colors, or preservatives. The cheese is real, the tomatoes are organic, and the pasta is made without synthetic conditioners, giving the dish a genuinely homemade feel. What makes this brand stand out in safety is its stringent allergen testing protocol. Every batch is screened for cross-contamination, especially peanut, gluten, soy, and dairy variants, ensuring consistent reliability for sensitive individuals. Amy's also avoids hydrogenated oils and synthetic stabilizers, relying on vegetables and whole foods for flavor instead of chemical shortcuts. The The sodium level is moderate, the ingredient list is short, and the taste is rich without being greasy. For families seeking long-term health, Amy's remains one of the safest, cleanest, and most transparent lasagnas on the market. Number 9. Capello's Grain-Free Lasagna. Capello's offers a completely different take on frozen lasagna. Grain-free, gluten-free, and made with almond flour pasta, making it a lifesaver for people with celiac disease, gluten intolerance, or gut sensitivities. Instead of relying on starches, refined flour, or gums, Capello's emphasizes whole proteins, clean tomato sauces, and quality cheeses without additives. This lasagna skips industrial fillers entirely, and that alone sets it apart from most major frozen brands. The pasta holds its structure exceptionally well because it's made with almond and cage-free eggs, providing a nutrient-dense base instead of empty carbohydrates. The ingredient list is short, pronounceable, and free from preservatives, synthetic thickeners, stabilizers, or artificial flavors. Capello's also maintains strict sourcing standards, screening for GMO contamination and ensuring dairy comes from RBST-free cows. Though pricier than mainstream brands, the safety, digestibility, and clean formulation justify the cost for anyone prioritizing real ingredients and steady energy levels. Number 8. Primal Kitchen No Dairy Lasagna. Primal Kitchen's No Dairy Lasagna stands out for one simple reason. It removes every artificial shortcut. Instead of dairy, the brand uses cashew-based creamy layers, clean tomato sauces, and high-quality vegetable blends. There are 0 inflammatory oils, 0 artificial binders, and no gums or emulsifiers, making it an excellent choice for lactose-intolerant individuals and anyone following paleo-friendly eating. The brand takes ingredient transparency seriously. All sauces are made with avocado oil, not seed oils, to avoid oxidation and inflammation. The lasagna is free from added sugar, synthetic colors, and chemical preservatives typically found in mainstream frozen meals. What makes Primal Kitchen especially safe is its strict supplier auditing system. Ingredients are tested for heavy metals, microbial contamination, and freezer stability without needing chemical stabilizers. Number 7. Rao's Made for Freezer Organic Lasagna. Rao's is known for its premium sauces, and their special clean frozen lasagna line delivers exactly that level of quality. This isn't the regular grocery store Rao's. This is a limited clean line made with organic whole tomatoes, real ricotta, premium beef, and 0 artificial stabilizers. Unlike typical frozen lasagnas, Rao's doesn't rely on modified starches, soy protein concentrates, or chemical emulsifiers. The pasta is made from organic durum wheat, giving each layer a firm texture without gum-based binding agents. The sauce is slow-cooked and free from added sugar, seed oils, or synthetic acidity regulators, meaning the flavor comes from actual tomatoes and herbs. What makes Rao's especially safe is its quality control tracking system. Every batch is verified for consistency, sodium accuracy, and microbial safety. The sodium is moderate, protein quality is high, and there are no preservatives. Just clean, restaurant-style lasagna. Number 6. Three Bridges Beef Lasagna. Three Bridges sets itself apart with fresh, refrigerated lasagna, allowing it to avoid the stabilizers, gums, and preservatives frozen brands depend on. The ingredients are incredibly transparent. Real mozzarella, clean beef, authentic ricotta, and tomato sauce without added sugar. Because it's refrigerated, Three Bridges keeps sodium lower than most frozen competitors and uses no artificial colors, fillers, or powdered cheese substitutes. The meat is antibiotic-free, and the pasta contains no chemical conditioners, a major win for sensitive stomachs. Testing standards are high. Each batch is screened for temperature, integrity, and microbial safety. The sauce contains only whole tomatoes, garlic, olive oil, and spice, with no citric acid or industrial flavor enhancers. The taste is richer and fresher because the product isn't ultra-processed for long freezer storage. For families wanting clean, fresh, protein-centered lasagna without chemical extras, Three Bridges remains one of the safest convenience options. Number 5. Evol Simple Ingredients Lasagna. Evol's Simple Ingredients line is exactly that: simple, clean, and transparent. The lasagna uses real mozzarella, RBST-free cheeses, whole tomato sauce, and pasta made without chemical conditioners or synthetic colors. There are no artificial preservatives, no GMO ingredients, and no filler starches that water down flavor. Instead of soybean oil, which many frozen entries rely on, Evol uses healthier fats and avoids gums like carrageenan that can irritate digestion. What makes Evol particularly safe is its commitment to traceability. Every ingredient, cheese, beef, and vegetables can be traced back to verified suppliers who follow clean practices. The sodium level is moderate, the portion size is reasonable, and the flavor tastes like a homemade casserole rather than a processed block. For anyone tired of industrial-tasting freezer meals, Evol's Clean Lasagna provides a trustworthy, digestible, high-quality alternative. Number 4. Feel Good Foods Gluten-Free Lasagna. Feel Good Foods specializes in allergy-friendly meals, and their gluten-free lasagna is one of the safest options for people with wheat sensitivities. The pasta is made from rice flour and clean starches, no gums, no artificial elasticity enhancers, and no synthetic binding agents. The cheese is real, the tomatoes are clean, and the beef is of higher quality than most mainstream frozen meals. What makes this brand safe is the company's dedicated gluten-free facility, which eliminates the risk of cross-contamination, a critical factor for celiac consumers. They avoid artificial preservatives, seed oils, and artificial flavors, keeping the ingredient list short and digestible. Taste-wise, it's surprisingly rich, with firm layers, instead of the mushy texture typical of gluten-free frozen products. Number 3. Artisan Bistro Clean Lasagna. Artisan Bistro focuses on whole food ingredients and sustainable sourcing. Their lasagna avoids everything artificial. No preservatives, no artificial colors, no synthetic stabilizers, and no GMO additives. Instead, they use hormone-free beef, organic tomatoes, clean dairy, and pasta made without industrial dough conditioners. What sets Artisan Bistro apart is its nutrition-first formulation. Each serving is built around balanced macros, controlled sodium, and complete proteins, avoiding the heavy, greasy profile of mainstream frozen lasagnas. The sauce is made from whole tomatoes, not paste concentrates, and the cheese blend is free from anti-caking chemicals. The company maintains strict batch testing for microbial safety and ingredient purity, giving it one of the cleanest reputations in the freezer aisle. If you want a lasagna that tastes homemade while meeting high nutritional standards, Artisan Bistro is one of the safest picks available. Number 2. Whole Foods 365 Organic Lasagna. Whole Foods 365 Organic Lasagna succeeds because it sticks to fundamentals: organic ingredients, minimal processing, and no artificial additives. The beef is grass-fed or pasture-raised in most regions, the cheese is RBST-free, and the tomatoes come from organic, non-GMO farms. There are no preservatives, no artificial colors, no seed oils, and no synthetic flavor enhancers. Instead of modified starches, the lasagna relies on natural tomato reduction and real cheese for structure. The sodium is lower than that of typical frozen lasagnas, and the ingredient list is refreshingly short. Whole Foods enforces strict quality standards. Every batch is checked for heavy metals, allergen purity, and ingredient consistency. The flavor is balanced. The layers hold perfectly after baking, and there's none of the greasy residue found in cheaper brands. For families wanting organic convenience without hidden chemicals, this is one of the safest and most reliable options. Number 1. Sprouts Organic Frozen Lasagna. Sprouts' Organic Lasagna is one of the cleanest mainstream frozen options available. Every ingredient, from tomatoes to beef to cheese, is certified organic, meaning no pesticides, no GMOs, no synthetic preservatives, and no artificial additives. The pasta is made from organic durum wheat, giving the lasagna a firm texture without industrial binders. The sauce contains 0 added sugars, 0 seed oils, and relies solely on whole tomatoes and spices for flavor. Sprouts also avoids cheap fillers like soy protein, modified starches, or dehydrated cheese powders found in conventional lasagna. What makes it especially safe is their third-party verification for organic integrity and allergen testing. Taste-wise, it leans toward a homemade, balanced profile rather than the heavy, greasy commercial feel. If you want a frozen lasagna that delivers clean ingredients, steady nourishment, and consistent safety, Sprouts Organic tops the list.